So, what is the most important lesson in life you've learned so far?
I have learned that the Lord has been working in my life, even though I was not aware of it. For example, when I was a child, my mother gave me a zippered Bible, although she never went to church. And also when I was leaving the 5th grade in Boise, Idaho, a man gave me a free pocket Bible, pocket New Testament. And I knew it's something important. I opened it, couldn't really understand what it said, but I still have it. I knew it was important. I still have it. I can even show you from the 5th grade. That's how old it was. That was from the Gideons. And then also it was a good thing that when I went to college, well, what happened was my mother was a widow, and she had 3 kids, and I was the oldest one, so I got blamed for everything when things went wrong. But she fed us, took care of us, although I never felt any love from her. And so I was determined from the 3rd grade on that if I would ever have anything, that I would have to get a college degree. And so I worked hard on my grades. To get a college degree, I figured I'd have to get a scholarship. And I figured to get a scholarship, you have to have really good grades. So I was very introverted all through school. And I can't say how I'm not sure I can say how the Lord was at work in that. But what was interesting was when I went to the University of Idaho, I had a high grade point average, I don't know, 3.75 or something like that, 3.8. And the fraternities were looking for people with good grades to join them so they could keep their grade point average up, but they're supposed to keep their grades up. And so I pledged Sigma Chi, and that was great because they taught me to. It was where I was able to identify with a very highly respected fraternity on campus, and they taught me some social graces I would never have known otherwise. Just simple things like how to sit at a table for dinner, and things like that. And so I would ask guys there, why do you go to the church you go to? I was searching for the Lord, in a way, and I took a class on world religions, and the one about Christianity was about Job and Albert Schweitzer. And I remember on the test, I was supposed to define what Christianity was, and my answer had something to do with those 2 guys. And the teacher wrote at the top of the sheet, "Good grief, no." But I would ask guys, why do you go to the church you go to? And they would say, well, nobody could really tell me. Some of the Catholics go out and party all night long on Saturday, and then go to confession the next day. That seemed hypocritical to me. And one guy that stood out the most was, he said, I think they worship God the way he should be worshipped. That's telling me about Jesus. And so, but still, it was there, and those kind of things were in my mind. And I would look at the stars at night in Boise, Idaho, and I said, how deep is the universe? Is there a God or isn't there a God? And I see things come to spring to life from the cold winter in the spring. It's amazing. Anyway, so that what happened then was, because I was in a fraternity and I learned some social skills that I never had before, that I went to work for General Electric as I graduated. I had an engineering degree. And we moved from, I had assignments, 3-year assignments, 1 year in one location, 1 year in another location, another year in another location. They started out in Ontario, California, then Oklahoma City, and then Syracuse, New York. And within each assignment, I had 2 other assignments. Anyway, it was in Ontario is where I met Janice. Some people set us up on a blind date kind of a thing. And so I can see God's hand in that now. At the time, I didn't realize it, but then she had qualities that were just the opposite of my mother, who was harsh and who drank. Not she didn't get drunk, but she drank, and I can remember my parents arguing over money all the time, but they come in every payday with a case of beer. I thought, wow, it was a waste of money. I didn't drink, okay, until I got in the fraternity. And then, so I met Janice. So what happened then was we got married, and we were in I finished this 3-year training program and got a job at GE in Tyler, Texas. And I didn't like the work, and I didn't like the location. The location stunk, okay, for living, and so I decided, well, I was going to move us back to California, where I first started out with her, with her family there and everything, because we got along. So I went into the general manager's office and I said, I'm leaving. I'm going to quit, and I'm going to go back to California. He said, those people that were your first assignment you had in Ontario, California, they have been calling to want to know if I was available to transfer there. And he said, and they called yesterday. And I said, I didn't know a thing about it, but that was God at work there, and I was not a Christian yet, okay, but still he was at work. And we moved to California, and then in California, when Janice wanted to go to church, and so I started going to church, and there I heard the word of God preached, and I accepted Christ as my Savior in 1967. And then I was still working at General Electric, and that's where I had that job I liked so well. And Wayne Stockstill asked me if I would join him. He was going to go into full-time evangelism if I would work with him, and he did the preaching, and I did the kind of the management of his organization, the two of us, and scheduling and things like that. And so I knew that so I had to keep that quiet for a year. I did not tell anybody where I worked. And I was going to do this. And so one day, the general manager called me in there, and he says, "You know, Wes, you need to take customers where they want to go, but you don't have to do what they want to do." And what that meant, in business terms, was taking them to topless clubs in Southern California. Okay. And so it was a couple days later, I turned in my resignation. I was planning on leaving anyway. I turned in my resignation to work with Wayne Stockstill. And the general manager said, "Oh my gosh, what have I done?" Yeah. He blamed himself for that. But so anyway, so I worked with Wayne. So that was God had to be working in that so I could work with him. And I always put my career and church together. They overlapped. Mm-hmm. They weren't separate. Okay, when I was a Christian at work, I was, and taught Sunday school and stuff at the church. Anyway, so that was one time I saw God at work. Another time, and then Wayne Stockstill and I were having some difficulty. I was having some difficulty because he would go out and preach and come back, and I had talked to him about scheduling other meetings. And he said he went to talk. He was just tired. He didn't want to talk. And I had these guys preachers asking questions about when he could come. And I thought, this isn't working out too well. I went for a walk from our house in Oklahoma up this path, and I said, "Lord, I don't know what to do." I said, and I walked back to the house. As soon as I walked in the house, the phone rang, and it was somebody asking me if I would go back and help them at GE, where I had worked before, as a contractor kind of a thing. Mm. So I figured that was the Lord working that. So I went there, and then because of the result, and money was an issue for Wayne Stocks. It wasn't as much of an issue for me. And So I figured I could make some money there and then not draw any salary from Wayne's organization. And so he let me go. He fired me, basically. And so then we went. So that was the Lord, and see again, that was the Lord's timing. Walk in the door, and there's the phone ringing. Okay, just like going into the manager's office in Tyler, Texas, and he said they just called yesterday, you know. So I see God working in that. So so I see Him working there, and then we came up. So I said, Janice, where do you want to live? Any place in the country? We lived across the United States, and she said, oh, we didn't know. So we had been on vacation to going up the coast to California one time. I was still working at GE, and we liked San Luis Obispo. And we had friends that I had worked with in evangelism. They were music ministers, and they were living in Tascadero, and they let us stay with them while I searched for a job and got the job at that place in Paso Robles. I know that. And then other times, you know, like I would speak up during the adult Sunday school, and so they asked me to teach. So I did that for many years, leading an adult class. So put that on pause. Another thing that happened was our son John, when he was in grade school, had a back problem. When he's out playing Little League baseball, instead of bending over to pick up the ball, he would squat down to pick up the ball because his back was hurting so much. And the doctor said that he had either tuberculosis or brucellosis in his back, and he had to go in for surgery. And through that whole ordeal, I had the peace that passes all understanding. I thought I should have been upset, but I wasn't. And that was God working again in my heart. Pause.
What was your first job like?
Okay, it seems like I've always worked. I had to do chores at home. I know some kids nowadays don't have to do chores at home, but because my mother was working full time, then we had chores to do, and we even did fix some meals, and we had to mop the kitchen floor and do the dishes and so forth like that. We didn't have automatic dishwasher, things like that. So there's always some work to do that had to be done around the house. And that was a good thing that we learned responsibility that way. But then I would cut lawns. And then the first meaningful job was when I was still in high school. There was a part-time job down in Boise, Idaho, Preco, Preco, where they rebuilt generators for cars and rebuilt batteries. And that was probably the first meaningful job. And that was part-time, after school.
How much did you make an hour?
I have no idea. That was centuries ago.
What is your favorite, quote-unquote, or life verse?
Life or verse? That has to do with my life, or just verse? My favorite verse?
Yeah.
For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. That's somewhere in, is it Corinthians? For Thessalonians?
Something like that.
That is very meaningful. But also, I mean, there's always been very meaningful verses, like when I was working at GE, and I was in a highly responsible job. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That was my verse for that. And also for teaching. And so I just depend on the Lord. So I can't say there's just one verse. Right now, my verse that is my life verse is Psalm 90, verse 10, which paraphrased would say you grow to be 70, and if by reason of strength you grow to be 80, and then later on you're going to fly away. Okay, so I'm at the next phase, ready to fly away.
What was it like? What do you remember about just life in general during the Vietnam War? If anything.
What I remember most was that I graduated from the University of Idaho in 1962, and a lot of guys I knew were trying to get out of being drafted, where they'd have to go to the Vietnam War fight. And because of my engineering degree and my employability, according to GE hired me, and it was at this Ontario facility, Ontario, California facility, where they had jet engines that they overhauled, and plus they had equipment that they designed to test the jet engines. And so, without my asking, they gave me a occupational deferment, critical defense deferment. So I wasn't drafted. Mm. And then I'd married Janice, and so I was getting old and all. So I never have been in the military. Mm-hmm. I'm not proud of it, but I'm glad I didn't go in someplace and get all crippled up and everything.
Mm-hmm. Where were you when you found out about JFK's assassination?
Oh, that was so easy. I was standing outside of some kind of a counter at General Electric in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and the announcement came over the PA system. Mm. They had been shot, killed, or something like that. That's where I was, Oklahoma City, at work. The announcement at work. So I remember that. Just it's one of those things like people never forget that. Mm-hmm.
What do you miss about the quote-unquote good old days?
I suppose some of the good old days would have been when I was in Idaho. I had my stepfather. My mother was a widow. He was a widower. And they got married when I was about the 9th grade, and he was an outdoors guy. And he'd take us, we'd go camping and hunting and fishing and stuff like that. And I missed the trips we'd go on camping and then go deer hunting. Kind of those good old days like that. We eat good. We ate wild game. Beef tasted funny because we had venison and duck and pheasant and dove and fish and all wildlife stuff up around Boise, Idaho. And of course, Boise's not that way anymore. But those were my good old days.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite holiday?
I don't pay too much attention to holidays.
Okay.
I suppose it'd have to be Easter, because that celebrates the most meaningful event in all of human history, as far as I'm concerned, where Jesus came out of the grave and he rose, and he conquered death, conquered Satan. And so Easter, I guess, would be the favorite holiday for me. Mm.
Did you ever have a nickname?
Yeah, I have one.
Wow. Yeah.
When I was in college, some guy was watching TV and he saw some Indian program. And the Indian was in a program, probably Western, and his name was Red Dog, so he thought he would find somebody to name Red Dog, so he named me Red Dog.
So do you remember the first time you got a television and what that was like?
I don't remember the first time I got a television, but I remember the first time color TV came out.
Okay.
We were in Syracuse, New York, and a friend of mine bought a little color TV, and it seems like it was like $250 back then. That would be like $1,000 now, okay? Mm-hmm. And I went over to see the color TV, but I don't remember when we had our first TV. We had, well, what was the question?
What do you remember about first getting a television?
Or when I was a kid, I think my mother bought a TV, and it was black and white. And you put this film over the front so it looked like sky and grass, and use rabbit ears.
Okay, what was your least favorite thing and your most favorite thing about school?
Oh, I loved algebra in high school. I loved algebra, and I hated history. History was just pure memorizing as far as I was concerned, but algebra made sense. So I loved algebra, and I went on to loved calculus. Algebra, we'd get a homework assignment, and I'd get the whole thing done during homeroom the next day. I was so good at it. And the reason I took it, and I loved it so much, the teacher said, engineers have to use algebra. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll become an engineer. I had no idea what an engineer did, but that's why I took engineering in college.
What was it like going to school when you were growing up versus like nowadays?
Well, one thing, Mommy didn't drive me to school all the time. She didn't have a car, for one thing, but kids walked to school. You weren't afraid of walking to school if you had to go to school. Some kids were far enough away they could ride the bus, but we were just within the edge of where you couldn't ride the bus anymore where I lived. And so I remember walking to school. We had to wear galoshes in the wintertime, and cars go through, drive by and splash up water on you, and slush. And it was really cold and wet. But anyway, what was the question?
What was it like going to school when you were a kid?
Well, so that was at Lowell Grade School in Boise, Idaho, when I was going to grade school. But I was also, when I was in junior high, I was getting good grades, and sometimes the kids that don't get good grades don't like the guys that get good grades. And I had to ride to school on a bicycle, and they might have a car, and they kind of teased me a little bit for that. I guess remember that. I can't remember exactly. It wasn't real serious, but anyway.
Yeah.
But also because I was so quote poor, we were poor, I was afraid to engage actively with any girls because I thought I wasn't worthy. Although I was interested in girls. One blonde girl asked me, her dad owns a movie theater downtown, like about the 8th grade, and she asked me if I would take her out on a date. And I just turned her down because I didn't think I was worthy. Yeah. So that's some of the bad parts. There's good parts and good parts of child growing up. And got walking home one day. This one guy decided to fight me, and it was close to my house. And so we were wrestling out on the street, and it was probably a dirt road. I can't remember exactly. Probably wasn't. I'm sure it wasn't pavement. Dirt road, and this woman came out of her house. She says, "You guys quit that, or I'm going to call the police." Because we was laid out there. I think he had me in a neck hold, and so we finally broke up. And we became really good friends after that. Plus another guy.
So, what did you and your friends do for fun while you were growing up?
What did we do for fun? Ride bicycles. And I would go swimming at the little grade school. They had a public swimming pool. I'd go swimming there. The school, but ride a bicycle. That bicycle. I'll tell you, that was another thing. I'm sure the Lord was involved in that. Mother could not afford to buy a bicycle for me. Okay. And I got up for Christmas one morning, and here was this beautiful Schwinn bike inside the house next to the Christmas tree. I mean, Schwinn. It had a basket, and it had a rack on the back for carrying stuff, And I never knew where that came from. Although I'm beginning, I doubt if it was a relative. At the time, I thought maybe it might be an uncle. I didn't have a father, see. He was dead, and I thought that maybe an uncle, but now I think back on, no, I don't think so. I think it was one of these things where in the community where they say, let's do something for kids that need help for Christmas time. I think some generous guy donated that because I was a quote good student, good kid, good student, and somebody thought I deserved it, or my mother applied for it because I can't imagine her doing that because she wouldn't ask for anything from anybody. And people who are at low income levels are that way. And but so I have no idea how but that bicycle changed my life because I could ride that bicycle. I'd ride it all the time, ride around the neighborhood, jump to little hills and stuff like that, like kids like to do.
Who was your best friend while you were growing up?
Forrest Skaggs. He was a grade ahead of me. But we would, he and this other guy, Gary Lunt, I think was his name. During the lunch hour in high school, we'd go play ping pong downstairs in the basement. And he and I, he liked to fish. I think I remember going camping with him one time or something. But we just kind of hung out, basically.
Did you have a curfew growing up, and did you ever miss curfew?
We never had anything called curfew.
Okay.
I wanted to go to bed so I could get some sleep and wake up in the morning and be fresh. I think we kind of had, when it got dark outside, we'd come in the house in the summertime, but.
What were your grandparents like?
My paternal grandmother hated her husband. She lived in a house in Boise, Idaho, and I think she was Nazarene, and she didn't like him. I think he had been a Pentecostal preacher or something one time, but she wouldn't let him in the house. I think he was unemployed, and she made him stay outside in kind of like a shed to sleep. And I don't know if there's a bathroom out there or not, but she liked us. She was a good grandmother to me, and so she was fine as far as we were concerned. Sometimes after school, in junior high, I'd go over there. She lived close to the junior high. I'd go over there and stay with her until my mother got off work. But she told me things like, I asked, was I related to President Buchanan? Oh yeah, you're a descendant of President Buchanan, the 15th President of the United States. Well, did I ever have an Indian chief in my background? Oh yeah, you had a great grandfather who was an Indian chief. She told me silly stuff like that, which I learned later was all lies because President Buchanan was a bachelor. She said things like that. And then on the other side, my mother was very close to her parents. They lived over in forever, at least 50 miles away from where we lived in Oregon, and we see them once in a while, but not very often. So they were fine. I don't remember interacting with them at all. But when we did see them, it was because my mother and her sisters and brothers would get there too, usually like for a funeral or something like that. And then at the funeral, I remember my grandfather had a funeral, and so everybody was at his house, and they were playing instruments. They liked to play instruments and dance. My mother and they're pretty good things at that. And then, of course, they drank beer, and my grandmother said, "You guys ought to be more respectful," and so they stopped. It's supposed to be mourning, I guess.
What is one of your favorite childhood memories?
Getting that bicycle.
If you had to choose another era to live in, what would it be?
Another era?
Yeah, like a different century or...
Oh, I wouldn't. I don't know. I'm happy with the one I'm in.
Okay.
I don't like the politics that's going on right now, but I get angry thinking about the Democrats.
Have you ever met someone famous?
I don't know. I guess not.
What is your favorite color and type of car?
My favorite color, that's an easy one. It's early morning, spring, field, grass, green. Very simple. My favorite car? I never have had a favorite car. The Toyota we're driving now is fine. Huh?
Your favorite car was that white one.
That one before we got married? Was it the Valiant?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was a good
You
car.
needed to give that one up.
Well, yeah, we had that one for years. I had that one. It was a Plymouth Valiant, had a slant six engine in it, and I could work on it myself. Had red upholstery, white exterior, and it had push buttons for the 7 gear shift. It had a few push buttons, and somebody we knew at church needed to have a car, and we needed to have some upholstery done on a couch, so I traded them straight across. They had an upholstery business. And a couple of weeks later, the car blew up.
Oh no.
I don't know what they were doing. They were getting on the freeway or something, and they blew it up. But she said that was my favorite car. That was really a good car, yeah.
What was the town you lived in growing up?
What was the what?
What was the name of the town you lived in growing up?
Boise, Idaho.
Okay. Who has been the most influential person in your life?
A human being, mine, you mean?
Yes, human being.
I suppose Janice. A lot of people influenced me.
Were you ever voted most likely to fill in the blank in high school or college?
No.
Nope. What is the key for a good marriage?
I think to be open with each other, I think. Well, I think that Christ is Christ as our Lord for each of us, and obeying Him, and learning and growing in grace. And I think, and not one thing I learned too is don't ever, especially when you're angry, let the word divorce come into your conversation. Never. You have to decide on that, because we've had our spats for sure. But making up is always wonderful. So I think we both like church too.
Apart from the Bible, because I'm sure you would say that, what is one book everyone should read in their lifetime?
I have no idea. I've read so many, collected so many. I've collected commentaries for the Bible. I think those are really important, but not. But that's not for everyone. I have no idea what other people should read.
Okay. Can you think of any book that was really influential in your life, or?
You already told me. You already got the answer.
Okay.
Right? So especially the writings of the Apostle Paul.
And then, what piece of advice would you want passed down through the generations?
Read that list, the things I wish I could tell, wish I had told my grandchildren.
Okay.
I think they should pass that on to their kids and their friends and so forth. I think because most of those Bible verses that are very meaningful on how to have a successful life and relationships with other people, regardless of where you are. One thing I learned that really hit me was, don't criticize another man's servant. He's responsible to his own boss, so to speak. Paraphrasing, but that's on that list. And so I wouldn't go around talking about other people where I worked. So I was not in the grapevine, so I missed out on a lot of stuff. But I figured that each person is responsible to his own master. It's none of my business, but if I was their master, then that was my business, their supervisor or something like that. That's on that list. I thought that was very important in getting along with people in the workplace or any place.